Ian,
Joël.
the New York Times has released another article with a lot of hot air in it, haven't they?
Oh, brilliant, Joël. You're learning from me.
We thought about that pun for a couple of minutes now.
Yeah. It took some practice to come up with a pun, but the New York Times and more FUD. It seems like a recent, not recent, let me rephrase that. It seems like recently that's the hot topic in the mainstream legacy media at the moment. They're attacking us hard on the whole energy and environment side of things. I think it's on the back of like people were fearful of like the energy crisis in air quotations and the cost of energy. And I think articles like this are just only capitalizing on that fear. And it reminds me of when I was speaking to Margot last time, and she was talking about, effectively, I'm paraphrasing here, good news doesn't make good news. And the algorithms on YouTube and Twitter don't encourage sort of like discourse, like sensible discourse. It's all about getting clicks, clickbaiting and things like that. And this seems to be a way that they just keep coming at Bitcoin in this narrow-minded, ignorant, and frustrating way, because time and time again, it's easily disproved, but people, the layperson reading these articles are just going to read this and take it as fact. And even again, citing the previous episode with Margot as well, and her being in academia in universities and things like that, and the fact that people in academia, professors, are citing articles like this in the New York Times as some sort of evidence as towards fact, without any critical thinking, without any discussion or debate about it, and it's frustrating the hell out of me, to be honest, Joel.
Yes. So
that's where I'm starting at with this episode.
It definitely is, and I think for all of the watchers on YouTube, or the viewers, sorry, not the watchers, the viewers on YouTube, I'll link all of the tweets I'm mentioning in the description, so you can have a look at the tweets we are talking about. We will share the screen and for the article maybe later on. But I want to start immediately with a very good response in my book by Daniel Batten. Not gonna lie, I became a Daniel Batten fanboy. So hoping he's making it to a couple of European conferences this year, where he basically answered within, that is 6:02 a.m. our time on the 10th of April. So that must have been, he's in New Zealand. I think he's 12 hours ahead, so at the end of his day, and he responded with like his 2 quick reasons why we should have zero trust in the New York Times article on Bitcoin. There's a table in there where they compiled the top 6 miners, and he basically went through all of these things, saying how the New York Times article overstates actual fossil fuel use by the following levels. And just to read it out, Ian, it's crazy. Riot platforms, which is one of the biggest one, overstated by 82.5%. Atlas overstated by 32.8%. Cypher mining overstated by 74.9%. The US Bitcoin Corporation, which is currently in a lawsuit to actually get hydro mining from the Niagara Falls back on, overstated by 74.9%. Rhodium by 89.9%, and Bitdeer by 82.5%. That gives you an average of roughly, I would say, 70 to 75-ish%. I'm just doing it on the fly now in my head. Oh, there it is. These emission levels are also overstated on an average by 81.7%. There you go. Shows you how good my math is. I was in the ballpark. But just to say, they overstated facts, which you can, I mean, you can't look it up like maybe a fact on Wall Street, where you can like go into a public company and get the information on a balance sheet. But you can ring these companies up. You can look at their public releases, because I think all of them, if I'm not mistaken, are also public. So there is enough of information out there. But this is just like the start of, if you actually break this article down, that they overstated emission levels, which are way lower than what they are, which then led to people like Riot platforms making a brilliant response, in my opinion, with that video where they showed how it has zero emissions and how actually it's a net benefit for the environment surrounding these mining sites. So just off the top of the table, it's incredible how deep down the rabbit hole they went to cherry pick. And that was the second point, that they did in fact cherry pick a lot of data, and this is a neat trick you learn in journalism school. Now I can speak as a former journalist. You all guys know I didn't finish my training, but this is stuff you learn. Like if you want to make the point for the article or mostly the opinion piece you're writing, you start cherry picking data and you start manipulating data, because this is one of the draw sides. If you have open accessible data, you can sort of bend it the way you want it to be displayed in, or how you want to make your point. And the article is full of such transgressions where you really go like, well, if they lied on these things, which we as Bitcoiners know I can verify, what have they lied in the past as well?
Oh God, yeah, and like, when haven't they lied really? I mean, you look in the papers, everything's sensationalized. I mean, looking at the language in the article that they've written, or this person has written, even the first paragraph, the first sentence, Texas was gasping for electricity. Like, how loaded is that, right? As a language, you know. And
Ian, just as a writer, this is a very cheap first hook you bring into this paragraph. You can do this two ways. You can either quote a well-known quote, like, I don't know, what's a good quote? I am Iron Man, for example. You quote that, then you start building your first paragraph around that quote. Or you're using a past event, which in this article here, they use with Storm Uri, which was a winter storm and had nothing to do with Bitcoin mining, and you build a narrative around that.
And they mentioned that 40 people had died, and some from freezing cold. How irrelevant is that to what was going on? Like, it's
to be honest, I wasn't surprised that they mentioned like, and another 20 people died with cardiac arrest because they fucked their death into Valentine's Day, because it's been on the 14th of February. So I really expected it when I saw the date that they will also add unnecessary information, which did happen with the New York Times in the past. But yeah, that is part of that manipulation I mentioned earlier. They laid a groundwork to then put the reader in a mindset where he goes, oh shit, people die because of Bitcoin mining. And these 40 people didn't die because of Bitcoin mining. They died because the state, who was responsible for infrastructure, didn't do their job properly, so people didn't have access to electricity or energy when the storm hit. Bitcoin mining has nothing to do with it.
In this article? No, of course
not.
No,
of course not. I mean, if we go on, there it is. In Texas, the computers kept running until just after midnight. Then the state's power grid operator ordered them to shut off under an agreement that allowed it to do so if the system was about to fail. Just as a reminder, that's one of the strengths of Bitcoin mining. We can turn the machines on and off instantly, and we can offload too much energy we're using or wasting in a certain area. In return, it began paying the Bitcoin company, Bitty, an average of $175,000 an hour to keep the computers offline. Over the next 4 days, Bitty would make more than $18 million for not operating from fees ultimately paid by Texans who had endured the storm, which again is a complete lie, because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's not like the Texans or the taxpayers pay these companies for electricity, which they could not provide during the storm. It's basic supply and demand. I think also there, they already messed up a couple of these things. And then they went into like, what is Bitcoin mining essentially?
Yeah, I mean, as a person reading it, like, I've always been suspicious of obviously mainstream media articles like this. I've always kind of tried to read in between the lines, and I've always been suspicious of statistics. Maybe, I don't know, that's the police officer in me that you know, I was always trying to look in between the lines of things, which has kind of done me a good service, really, because when I see things like this, I'm like, really? And where is it cited that this has come from? Because look, if you want to find information, you will find it. You know, if you're biased in some way, you'll go out and find the data that you need to sort of back it up, and that's what seems to has happened here in this particular article here. And when it goes into like areas where it could talk about the positive side of Bitcoin, it just sort of tails off and just sort of like is a little bit ambiguous about a fact, and then just goes on to the next FUD. So it's very clearly written in the negative for Bitcoin mining, without. My mindset is that if you're going to write a piece about mining, you need to sort of like be quite neutral in it, and clearly this is an attack vector on Bitcoin mining, and that's all it is.
to be fair, we kind of expected a hit piece by the New York Times ever since February. It's been going around.
Well, they need to sell newspapers, right?
Yeah, and I mean, you know what funny is? I actually saw that today by Raphael Schön, the head of content by Relay. He mentioned it that the New York Times needs to print their physical newspapers, so the ones they're selling at train stations and all of these things.
Yeah.
They'll deliver them 7 days a week. They use 52 diesel-powered trucks to do so. And that thing keeps running more or less 24/7. Because, like, obviously they have different time zones in America. And, like, you have to schedule around these things, probably drive longer and shorter distances. So if we already go about whataboutism, isn't that also a part in your problem where you could say, technically speaking, you could just digitalize everything? And I'm sure, like, the web service of the New York Times, which is not just the newspaper, the Times as a company is a publicly traded company still in private property, I guess. You still have to go to the family owning everything, but they're the largest shareholder. They're also wasting energy in that perspective. So where is the internal, article or the internal hit piece? Obviously they're never going to do it. But what I found even more stupid are these statements like the computers in the buildings in Kernby, Nebraska use about as much electricity as 73,000 homes around them. The same to be said for one in Georgia, in Dalton. I think that is Georgia, GA, with 97,000 households. For how long with the households, and in what time frame, and how? Like, if I leave the house and I leave my dog home for an hour, if I don't need to go shopping because I can't bring him in anyway, and I leave the lights on, that's also wasting energy in that perspective. Or if I maybe feel cold because I'm sick and I turn the heat up ever so slightly, I'm using more energy than what I usually do. Where's the context here? Is it 97,000 households per day, per year, in 10 years? Are we wasting as much energy as these households in a lifetime? Like, where's the line they're drawing? But it's just another example of how they're manipulating the reader, and it's really well structured from a storytelling perspective.
It doesn't go into explaining where that statistic is. Basically what you're saying. I mean, looking at the landscape in those areas. I mean, where is that population concentrated, and what where does their energy come from? And what type of it's not going into who lives there, the type of towns or cities nearby, where they're located, and what is the demand over a long period of time. It's just a very small statement that. And
I mean, if you look at this map, for example, Ian, this is like the comparison between Riot platforms and BitDeer's farms. They're less than a mile away. And like every one of these small dots, I'm not sure if you can see them properly, represents one household. And within a 40 miles radius, you'll see that they're wasting as much energy as all of these households. Well, guess what? If I plug down the YouTube data center for, I don't know, South America, it will probably look 20 times worse than this. And it's not like these two are in the middle of like Manhattan or London. They're quite abandoned in like this Rockdale, Texas, which, by the way, they apparently mentioned the wrong name in the article on the one image, someone told me.
Not really.
They changed it now. In the opening parts, it said the BitDeer mine in Stockdale, Texas, I think it was, instead of Rockdale.
Right.
They didn't even factually did it right. But just these examples are what's really nagging me, because if you can provide your claims with context and data, I can go, okay, at least you did the proof of work. But it's just another example by the New York Times for what proof of sake is, essentially. And that they're wasting. Well, they even went into the article
speaking about Ethereum, right? And they're plugging Ethereum further down the article, saying it's proof of stake. And, there's already been work done to sort of minimize the environmental or energy impact on producing these cryptocurrencies.
I think there it is. There are ways to operate the cryptocurrency using far less electricity. Last year, Ethereum, the second most popular cryptocurrency, reduced the electricity need to power the network by more than 99% by switching its algorithm. FYI, didn't change its algorithm. It changed its consensus model, just as a factual wrong again. But there you go. They obviously use the good Ethereum. Not mentioning that all of the scams have happened in the past on Ethereum and Binance, their blockchains. So,
Yeah.
again,
It would
we
seem,
could
right,
discuss
that the legacy media is stuck in their own echo chamber. And what I mean by that is, like, it just seems like a recycling of all the other sort of FUD energy use of Bitcoin articles that I've read, because they always cite the change in the Ethereum code or whatever they say it is, to be proof of stake, and how better for the environment that is. It's so, like, not thought out, narrow-minded, and it's clear that whoever writes these articles doesn't really fully understand what proof of work actually means and the benefit it can have or will have for the planet and for everyone living on it. It just seems like no matter where you go, in like the New York Times or the Financial Times or any of these mainstream legacy medias, they just keep on saying the same stuff in different ways. And they just don't seem to ever take that next step in writing articles that, counteracts what the FUD is. And Decentrasue's, she's got her own column now, hasn't she, in City AM? And it's nice to see that, because City AM, they did 2 articles with Susie Violet Ward, aka Decentrasue's, one about CBDCs and one about the environment. So it's great now that we're starting to get Bitcoiners in the mainstream media who can start to counter this nonsense. So well done to you, Susie. Yeah, that's all I've got to say for now, Joel.
Yeah, and there's also a point in there, again, I'll link the tweet, by Level 39, where he went that the New York Times is so anti-Bitcoin mining and essentially anti-proof of work, that they ignore their own facts, because they spent 6 months trying to figure out how they can tell readers that the demand response programs by the US Department of Energy is bad, but because they have a certain way of presenting that response by the Department of Energy, that was good, halted as, okay, it may be wasteful to use this energy for different things, but it's good how they present it. And Bitcoin mining, which is literally, we use energy as a backstop to not allow people to duplicate their coins. You have to show what your work was to be rewarded with a block reward, currently sitting at 6.25 Bitcoin, will be halved in the next halving. And it's called the halving, not the halvening, dear Americans. If we use that example, which has a real world use case, I can trade my Bitcoin in certain countries for legal tender. I can pay my mates all around the world in seconds. That is certainly bad. So you sort of see the hypocrisy popping up left, right and center. But again, I'm not surprised with the New York Times, because it's like you said, Ian, it's a dying industry and they're stuck in their echo chambers. And you have to realize, guys, journalists working at these institutions, they're very much controlled in that environment as well. And it's not like they can break free suddenly and do whatever they want. They're very much in possession of everything which is going around in the newsroom.
And I was speaking to Joe Hall. That's where I learned that from. Is basically that you have to write something, and it has to go through an editor, and it's basically the editor's choice as to whether or not it gets there. So you need to meet a certain threshold or certain sort of tone for it to be likely put out there, and you need to put bread on the table, right, for these journalists. So they're writing articles that they know that the editor will pull out there, and they know that will sell papers at the end of the day, and that's why the editor's choosing these articles, because it's just an article that's going to sort of cause discussions like this. We're creating a YouTube video on the back of this mainstream media article, which is talking nonsense, and here we are sort of like fighting against it yet again. But this is kind of what they want. They kind of want the controversy and without the actual fight as well.
And I guess it's also to a certain degree that they can obviously sell more ads, because you can now target with your sales rep and advertising teams and revenue teams the crypto army of Elizabeth Warren, and sort of go there and say, we've published this thing and we've did that and we've did this, and like you can pay us a lot of money
certain
to
funding.
Exactly, and to be featured here. So it's obviously a game they're playing, and they're very good at this. But yeah, again, like just the paragraph I'm in now, each day that June, they were talking about June 2020, when it was so hot in Texas, its computer guesses the mining industries were winning Bitcoin worth an average of about 342,000, but the company had 2 additional ways to improve its profit margins. That's not true. They were not winning that on average. That was the block reward they were gaining per block. And obviously, when the weather gets that hot and there is a danger of overloading the grid, energy prices get more expensive for that time, or it's harder to deal with an energy broker to get that energy consistently. So they will cut into these margins. So again, they're not showing the full picture. Funnily enough, Ian, I don't know if it's down to the New York Times article or not. It had a positive price pump. And people are already calling it the New York Times pump.
Come on, Bitcoin. Thank you, New York Times. You're the best. Yeah, we certainly are. But like with this whole thing, there's no mention of solar, right? Because we're incentivized to, as Bitcoin, I say we, Bitcoin miners are incentivized to use renewable wasted energy. So there's a whole lot of work being done on the solar side, and Margot was talking to us about how that is sort of like being worked out at the moment, about the having all these solar panels in one place and the demand and distributing that across different areas to try and maximize the use of electricity and the efficiency of it. There's loads of work being done around methane, which basically is a wasted product as a result of agriculture, and is some kind of I believe some sort of oil production and things like that.
Yes,
it produces methane as a waste product, and methane is more wasteful to the environment, also more harmful, to the environment than CO2. So
about 65 to 80 times more dense than CO2.
Yeah, I think the highest I said is about 80 times more. So it's methane is more damaging to the environment than CO2. And the main thing we hear about in the likes of the New York Times and then things like that is it's all about CO2. We never really hear about methane at all. That's because, in my mind, you've got a lot of these producers of electricity that are, producing these waste products, and the way that they're sort of combating the emissions of methane is by flaring it. They're burning it into the sky and then turning that methane into CO2, which is also damaging, but not as much as methane. But here you've got Bitcoin miners that are using methane without flaring it to mine Bitcoin. So it's not producing CO2 or methane. It's going straight into the production of Bitcoin. Where's the mention of that in this article?
Zero. There's zero mention about methane. There's zero mention about solar. But this is a current thing. If you also read, for example, climate change reports, climate change initiatives where, and I'm not talking about like the likes of Greenpeace, because they're not a climate change organization, they're a populist organization, or Extinction Rebellion. I'm talking about, proper research being done by climate researchers like Margot, for example, or Troy, or Daniel. And they're all talking about how this gas, which is 80 times worse, essentially, than CO2, is just being put on fire, it flares out, so it opens up the ozone layers again and puts hole in the air, which when I was at school, Ian, I was told that was bad.
Yeah.
You too, I imagine.
Yeah, the ozone layer was a big thing.
Yeah, it completely disappeared, and suddenly this focus is on CO2, and then you start seeing it pop up in other places. When I turn on the TV and I watch a bit of football, proper football, again, Americans, not soccer, it says underneath there by Sky Sports that they are carbon free or carbon neutral, and they're closely getting to that goal by 2030. And I'm like, how can you be carbon neutral if you're running a TV station that has satellites up in the air? Which is, because at the end of the day, these are signals being broadcasted with radio waves. That is breaking tiny, tiny fragments of the atmosphere as well. So where's that mention of all of the things which are truly harming the environment? And to get it back to Bitcoin, it's fascinating that if you actually go and look in the New York Times article, guys, and you look for methane, solar, renewables, these words, I think renewables gets mentioned a few times in the terms of Bitcoin is not using renewables, but there's no mention of what the alternatives are. Because, Ian, I'll ask you, if I could heat my house with methane gas, which I can buy as an overload, let's say, from a Bitcoin mining rig, I can transport it into my house, which is probably the most expensive part about it all, but I can then heat, and at the same time, I know the closest mining facility is getting cheap sats this way. Wouldn't that be an amazing ecosystem? And that's what's missing, in my opinion, in a lot of these reports. They, again, lack context because they don't show the reader, yes, Bitcoin is using a lot of energy. No one is denying this.
Yeah.
But it's using it as a security feature and not just because we think it's cool to like waste energy and then people die in the next winter storm.
And this is where we need to cross that bridge, really, in terms of helping people understand what the Bitcoin fundamentals are and what Bitcoin is, because they see this and there's no mention really of why Bitcoin, why are they mining it in the first place, and what is Bitcoin. It's just, there's this thing called Bitcoin that is apparently this currency that is just sort of come from this random sort of out of nowhere, and it uses so much energy. It's almost like the tone I get sometimes, I hear through all these articles is like Bitcoin shouldn't be taken seriously. It's for these delusional people who are kind of playing around with this pretend money, and as a consequence they're damaging the planet by this amount of percent, and whatever percentage they cite is completely skewed and uneducated. So yeah, that's the sort of tone I get when I read these things.
I would, if that would be a bill, I would co-sign it, Ian. Because at the end of the day, even if we manage to like turn all of the mining rigs off, if Bitcoin were to not exist anymore, you would get rid of an energy source which uses at max 0.2% of world energy resources. Yeah. And I think wastes about 0.18% of CO2.
This is where I get annoyed, because how much does the TradFi, the traditional banking, you know, I've asked this question again more than once, but it's frustrating. I need to keep reminding people, like the amount of energy that's expended in producing this shit money that they call money by decree is phenomenal. And it's not only the production of this money, but it's all the industries in between, and all the energies that they use on top of that as well. It's absolutely phenomenal and so hypocritical that we've got this attack on Bitcoin when you've got all these other industries using far much more energy and wasting and using cheap, dirty ways of obtaining this energy, whereas, you know, Bitcoin isn't. It just frustrates me.
And at the end of the day, you know, they go to such lengths that they even manipulate data, they even manipulate imagery, because this is the last part I want to mention. Again, I'll link that in the show notes. There is a tweet out there from Rory, and Rory Highside is his username. The guy can really also manipulate images, because he did a lot of the clips you saw last year and the year before, where, you know, you see like the Terminator with laser eyes and he tells you to buy Bitcoin or stuff like this. He's really talented. And he actually analyzed the drone footage from the New York Times, the stuff you see when you open the article.
Right.
And in there, he sees that they altered the histogram in the color.
Of course they
meaning
did.
They did change it to give it this
to make
foggy,
it look all cloudy and polluted.
Exactly, bad,
smoggy,
polluted. And the funny thing is, the stuff which is probably polluting that air in that region, in Roxdale, that has nothing to do with Bitcoin mining. That's like an oil rig or whatever in the background. So it's funny as hell that they go this far to just simply fit their narrative. But again, in my opinion, that's why they're failing, because if people see this once, the mind starts working and they go like, well, if they lied here, where else have they lied? And you mentioned a great point. TradFi is one thing. What about electric cars, EV emissions? They still use more fossil fuel energy sources than Bitcoin mining.
Yeah.
I'll link the tweet from Daniel Batten again. So it's just hypocritical. But the good thing is, guys, yes, we are in the and they will fight you stage now. But if you look how the response were under a lot of tweets, if you look how united the Bitcoin community comes out, and essentially if you look at the price now, there's more demand for Bitcoin, so the price is going up. We are winning. It will be a long fight. It will be a hard fight. Speak to a gold bug once in a while. They had this fight as well with the gold mining industry, which is worse than the Bitcoin mining industry, again. We'll definitely not get rid of these things tomorrow, but it's good to keep talking about them and use these negative examples to make your points, show where they went wrong, and educate people around you so that they don't get that reach that they had in the past. That's really my call to action for the viewers today.
Yeah, and if this is the first time you've listened to our podcast, thank you. Stay tuned, because we do meet up regularly, Joël and I. We're trying to meet on a weekly basis and start to talk about the main themes that are happening within the Bitcoin space every week. So if you like this kind of content, please just give us a like and subscribe and give us some feedback as well. And hit us up with some of your own statistics and opinions and comments as well. We're not easily offended, and we welcome positive feedback. We're on all the other platforms as well. So, tune in. Oh, and we need to mention, Joël, we've got a winner, haven't we? For our competition for the 2 general access tickets to the Bitcoin Miami 2023, and it was Mr. Movement. Well done. I hope you enjoy yourself. I know he's excited because he's DM'd me a couple of times and he tweeted about it, so he's very happy that he's got these general access tickets, so well done. Sorry if you participated and you didn't win. Maybe we'll do something again in the future, but better luck next time, guys. But congratulations to Mr. Movement.
Yes, huge congrats. And we'll always try and make an effort to get more people included in the Bitcoin community. That's the goal of the podcast. Bitcoin is not a right-wing ideology. It's not a left-wing ideology. It doesn't care where you come from. It seriously doesn't. But it cares where you want to go with them. You have to consent to the consensus model, which is proof of work. If you do everything right by that consensus and all of the nodes agree on your action or whatever you did, you'll be a part of that network. And that's what we want to showcase with Rabbit Hole Stories. So many people have so many different backgrounds and stories to tell. But at the end of the day, we're all Bitcoiners.
On that note, thank you guys, and see you next time.